Do you have an interest in the legacies that historical and not so historical figures leave behind? Are you curious about how to ensure family heirlooms and life lessons are passed on from generation to generation? Are you interested in developing your end of life plan to alleviate family discord and encourage generational wealth? Well, I invite you to listen to Heirloom and Legacy, a podcast that explores ancestry, heirlooms, legacy, mortality, and more. I am Angeline C. Fraser Giles, your host, and I look forward to sharing these discussions with you. Thank you for joining me today. I recorded this episode in December 2021 when many of us were connecting via social media and Zoom due to the pandemic. My friend and colleague, Reggie Shuford, posted an incredible story about his family, and I immediately reached out to him and asked if he would appear on my podcast. He agreed, and I'm so glad he entrusted me to help him tell his story to the broader community. In this episode, Reggie discusses his life trajectory and is honest and vulnerable in detailing his upbringing by his single mom. His story culminates in a peculiar and heartfelt discovery of his family. It is part one of a two-part series, so I hope you will join us next week for part two. At the time of our discussion, Reggie had been the executive director of the ACLU of Pennsylvania since 2011. During a tumultuous time in the state's politics, the ACLU of Pennsylvania successfully litigated lawsuits to defeat a restrictive voter identification law in 2012 and to overturn the state's Defense of Marriage Act in 2014, 1 year before the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on marriage equality. The organization also advocated and won in struggles to narrow the scope of the criminal legal system. Reggie was most recently appointed as the executive director of the North Carolina Justice Center. He is originally from Wilmington, North Carolina, and is a graduate of UNC Chapel Hill School of Law. He is also a former Harvard Law School Wasserstein Public Interest Fellow and is the recipient of numerous awards, including the Minority Business Leader Award from the Philadelphia Business Journal, the Humanitarian of the Year Award from the William Way LGBT Community Center, the Living Legal Legend Award from Penn State Law's Black Law Students Association and Multicultural Undergraduate Law Association. And he was twice named one of Philadelphia's most influential African Americans by the Philadelphia Tribune. In taking on his new role, Reggie stated, "Since I left North Carolina in 1995, I have been privileged to do work at the national and state level, advancing racial and social justice. I am honored to be joining the NC Justice Center, one of the state's preeminent advocacy organizations, to do the vital work necessary to make that vision a reality." When you hear my discussion with Reggie, you will know why I was so excited to talk to him. I hope you enjoy and join us next week for part two.
Hi, how are you? Good to see you. Good to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. So let's just get started. I was going through your bio, and as we talked about, so many distinguished awards that you've received for your work that you have done regarding racial profiling, race and diversity, LGBTQ issues. So what I want to just talk to you briefly about first is, what made you get into law and what made you get into public interest law in the aspects in which you are involved right now?
Well, first of all, thank you for the lovely introduction, as well as the invitation to be with you today. Um, I was 6 years old when I decided I wanted to become a lawyer. And how that happened was I was just an inquisitive kid. I wanted to know stuff, why things were the way they were, why they worked the way they worked, and all types of things related to family and siblings and parents. Like I wanted to know how all of it worked. So I asked a lot of questions, and so when people visited our home, I would get them off in the corner by myself and just ask them all types of questions. Do you have brothers and sisters? Do you get along with your brothers and sisters? What's your favorite book? What's your favorite color? Just on and on and on. And so more than one person said to me, "Slow down, kid, you sound like a lawyer." And so I had an aha moment at age 6 that I would become a lawyer. I didn't
Wow, that's
really.
pretty amazing at 6.
It's at 6 years old. I didn't really know what lawyers did, and I didn't know any lawyers at the time, and certainly there were none in my immediate family. And but I also just had this really deeply embedded sense of right and wrong, and justice and injustice. And
Mhm.
so even the most minor incidents would get me kind of riled up. And so, for an example, we just young kids, my siblings or cousins and I, all around the same age, under 10 for the most part, would go to the corner store, get candy used to be a penny, then get penny candy, be excited about our candy. And I just remember my cousins and siblings would be so excited that they got this candy that they throw their money on the counter, grab the candy, and run. I'm like, slow down. Like, this is a transaction. You are due
Mhm.
change. Like, the right thing is for you to get your change. And so I was always advocating for people to make sure they got what they deserved, and that for other people to do the right thing, like even as a kid. And it's so deeply, deeply ingrained in me. It's like it's a visceral thing for me. Justice and injustice are visceral things for me. And so there was only a brief moment after age 6 that I contemplated doing something else. I also like to write. I like to read, and so I was having a conversation with my ninth grade English teacher, Bonnie Daniel, who was so pivotal in my career path and my academic journey. Um, I was having a conversation with her, and she was like, "So, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And in that moment, I said, "I would like to be an editor, right? Like a literary editor." And that
Mhm.
was the only time I've ever answered that question, other than I want to be a lawyer. And so that was just a very fleeting kind of moment where I contemplated something else, but everything else pointed me back in the direction of law. And I think, especially given the circumstances that we grew up in. I mean, I was just starting school after in Wilmington, North Carolina, just after a long battle um, by folks in my hometown um, against integrating public schools. Like there was so Brown v. Board of Education was 1954, but Wilmington, North Carolina didn't really begin integrating the schools until more than a decade later.
Mhm.
And and so there's a lot of residential segregation, racial segregation, poverty. I was one of 5 children raised by a single mother, and I just witnessed how difficult her life was as a poor Black single woman in the South. And so all of those things, all of the things I observed, the things I experienced, um, pointed me in the direction of law, with the goal of trying to fight for justice for everybody, essentially. And
All
so
right.
here I am. All these years later, here I am.
It's just absolutely amazing that you started at 6, because not many people could say at 6 they knew what they wanted to do, but at 6 you had that internal kind of passion for wanting to see justice, right? And then having that lived experience with your mom, being a single mom growing up in the segregated South, um, trying to raise 5 kids and making it.
Yeah.
That would leaves an indelible mark on you, and it shows in the work that you're currently doing. So, in growing up in North Carolina, your you said your mom was raising you, she was single,
Yes.
and you had some idea of who your other parent was,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Happy to. So yeah, I mean, as I said, my mom raised all five of her kids single-handedly. Um, we always assumed that each of us had the same mother and same father. And the person that I thought was all of our father was nowhere to be found in any of our lives. I mean, that was pre-DNA, right? And so,
Mhm.
um, he just said none of those kids are mine, and that was just a bold and blatant lie. And so I didn't feel like I was being treated any differently. Like none of he didn't have a relationship with any of my siblings, and it
Mhm.
is not the case that he wasn't the father of at least some of most of the five kids, right? I mean,
Right.
now what I know is a little different, but at the time, yeah, we all thought we had the same mother and father, and he wasn't helpful in any respect to any of us, and so it left my mother to do the best she could. We were on government assistance, and we got food stamps, and lived in public housing, and all of that stuff, and she really, really struggled, um, and did the best that she could. But it was we felt the lack of stable family
Of care.
environment. Absolutely,
Mhm.
it
From
cer-
him.
from him, and yeah, all of the other things that go with like family,
Right,
right?
right. Mhm.
Aunts and uncles and grandparents and all
Mhm.
that love, right? That money can't buy. So it was an economic issue too, but it also was an issue in terms of our um, you know, how stable we were as a family unit, how emotionally healthy like we could get given all the struggles that we were experiencing. So it's partly about no child support, but also about the lack of emotional support and all those other ways that family and as healthy as ideal, right,
Mhm.
can show up for you.
Yeah. So in experiencing those things as you were a youngster and growing up, you just made yourself more determined to get through law school, obviously get through undergrad, get through law school, so that you could fight for the underdog, so to speak, and ensure that racial justice and social justice issues were at the forefront.
Yeah, I mean, I was single-minded about that. And let me just say, like, so I made the decision at age 6 that I would become a lawyer. Like, I didn't know what that entailed necessarily, but it wasn't an easy path, right, to get
Mm,
there, right? I mean, all of the issues that I raised before were certainly there, and I had some trouble when I was especially in junior high school, right? And I would kind of talk back. I would
mhm,
act out, right? Because things were really unstable at home, and then
mhm,
they have to that instability has to manifest some way. And for me, it was just kind of being kind of a smart ass kid and talking back, and so it would really would frustrate my teachers who said, "You are such a smart kid. Like why why can't you just sit down and be quiet
listen,
and do your
right,
work, right?"
right,
And
right.
so
Not recognizing all of the like everything
all
else that
the
was going on,
all the
right?
trauma, yeah, because at that point my mom had ended up getting into this very long relationship with a guy who was abusive, physically abusive, and had drug addiction issues, and was further destabilized our lives, and there's just a lot of trauma. And so I had a couple of interventions in junior high school. And so in seventh grade I had been written up so many times and sent to the guidance counselor's office and the principal's office. And the guidance counselor during seventh grade was a Black woman whose name was Minnie Williams. And so at the end of seventh grade year, I'd been in school suspension and out of school suspension. She's like, Reggie, I don't really understand. Like, you're such a smart kid, you get good grades, but you cannot keep out of trouble. She said, I think you must be bored and unchallenged. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have you place an academically gifted starting eighth grade, and maybe that will be the challenge you need to get you on the right track.
Now, isn't that amazing that a teacher at that time saw in you that maybe you were bored, not that you were just bad, right? Because that's what kids are labeled if they're
Yeah,
disruptive, talking back, not
yeah,
being able to sit still in class, that
yeah,
they are disruptors.
yeah.
Um,
Sometimes
so this
disruptors is good, sometimes
sometimes it's
not, right?
good, sometimes it's good, good trouble.
Yeah,
But that a teacher saw in you something more,
yeah. A
right?
black teacher. I mean, let's
Mm,
be really clear
yes,
about
let's
this was a
yes.
black woman too, and so I was like, okay, all the other teachers and principals who had said that I heard, but she actually put some action to it.
To it,
She
yes.
put herself out on a limb to see if that was what I needed. I was like, I'm not gonna let her down. Come eighth grade, I like it was almost a complete turnaround. Like I got really serious, really disciplined, really focused. And from that point on, I was like, I was
That
not
was it.
turning back. That
Can't
was
stop
it.
him now. Can't stop him
I
now.
was like, I'm gonna do this. Someone really went out on a limb for me, and I wanna honor that, and I wanna show appreciation and gratitude for what she did because
Mhm.
it put me on the right path. Absolutely.
Good, good. Well, of course, here you are today. So let's fast forward a little bit. You met someone in your career
Mhm.
who you worked with or had some type of working relationship with because you were both ended up in similar settings,
Yeah.
and so you were friendly enough, I guess, with this person
Mhm.
and respected the person enough. And so could you talk a little bit about that person, and then we'll get to how you found out more about this person in present day.
Sure. So again, already decided I wanted to be a lawyer. Here I was in college. I had some free summers, and I was needing to work to earn money for school. And so I was talking with my mom, and I said, "Yeah, I just need a job, right?" And she knew, of course, that I wanted to be a lawyer. And so she said, "Well, I know a lawyer, and maybe I'll just ask him if he'll hire you to work in his office for 2 summers while you're in college." And she did that, and so it happened. And his name is Peter Greer, a well-known lawyer in North Carolina and in my hometown, Wilmington. Um, so he gave me a job to work in his law firm for 2 summers. And so again, I was in college. It was way before law school, a couple years before law school, and so I didn't have any legal training, but working in his office certainly gave me exposure to how the law could work,
Mhm.
and not just kind of the specific focus or expertise or discipline that somebody takes up, but also how you can use your legal training to become an activist or advocate, just generally. So I learned kind of those lessons from him. And he was one of very few Black lawyers in Wilmington at the time. And I still don't think there are very many.
Mhm.
So it was just fortunate that he and my mom had grown up together. So fortunate that she knew him and could ask him, and that he said yeah, because he was hiring a college student, like not somebody with actual legal expertise.
Right, right. And so what year was this when you were hired?
I'm thinking 1986 or 7 ish, that around
Okay.
that time. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to fast forward again. And as many of us have done, we have taken DNA, gone through one of the various entities in which you send in your DNA, and it comes back with just your culture, your heritage, your like where you're from, based on all of the DNA markings. And I know that I'm always very interested, watching, some of the shows that talk about legacy and from whence you came, because
Yeah.
as a Black person in America, we don't know right? Necessarily where we've come from, our history in terms we know that Africa is in there somewhere because we're
Yeah,
Black people,
yeah.
but the trajectory is just so sometimes so unknown because of the fact that there wasn't records kept of you know how we got here. For myself, my mom's parents were born in Honduras in Central America.
Mhm.
My father's was born in Honduras in Central America. Um, we don't have necessarily connections to the South other than my mother being born in Louisiana. But um, I think that having that DNA, and you can actually look at a chart that says you are a certain percentage, from Congo, or you're certain
Yeah.
percentage from, wherever else in Africa, I think is really important. So talk a little bit about why you decided to do the DNA test.
So I never really thought I had flirted with the idea of doing it, but wasn't that serious about it because I didn't think there was anything about my background that was gonna, be revealed as particularly interesting. Like I felt I knew who I am and where I'm from and all of that stuff. And I was having dinner with one of my cousins. I was home for a week in North Carolina, and we were at the beach, and I was having dinner with her. And she was talking about having done it herself, and she was like, "It's great." And I was thinking, "Is it? Is I mean, is it is it a thing? Is it a real thing, or is
Hmm.
it just some kind of money making venture?" And I also, have concerns about privacy and all of
Privacy,
that stuff too,
exactly.
right? And so, like, I don't know if I want all my stuff out there, right?
You don't know what
So
they're doing with it. And being someone
exactly,
like an advocate like you, there was a controversy a few years ago about them finding out that the DNA of one brother, they had arrested someone. And it was the
yeah,
brother of the person that had committed the offense, and it was just
right,
like, okay, DNA. And then they were trying to take DNA at a point of arresting someone, and we're like, no.
exactly. Because if in the wrong hands or used for the wrong purposes, it's not a good thing.
Right.
So, but she was so excited. She's like, it is. She said, it is a real thing. You can learn so much. And she just encouraged me to do it. Like a number of other relatives had done it. I was like, okay, you know, if nothing else, I will, as you said, have greater insight and knowledge about where I came from originally in Africa. If nothing else, I would
Right.
know that. I would know if I had any Native American ancestry and so on and so forth. And so a couple of weeks, I did it. I decided to do it, and then a couple of weeks later, I got my results,
Hmm.
and they were not as mundane or boring
As you thought,
as I thought they were
as you
going to
first
be.
suspected, there was a little bit of I
Whew,
don't know. Well, I should say not a little. It was
a
a lot
lot.
of
It's some life altering stuff, and
revelations. Yes.
absolutely, that's the right word. And I just had to. So I was excited about learning that I'm mostly Nigerian and other places in West Africa.
We're
Yeah,
cousins. We're
I
cousins.
know exactly. Um, and then also, of course, some European ancestry because this is America,
Yes.
uh, and my family's Southern, so certainly there was some of that, and a little Native American, not a lot, but some Native American ancestry too. So those things were really interesting. Um, but what was shocking was that the man I had presumed was my biological father, there was nothing in those results that indicated that he was. And by that I mean he's not alive, so he obviously his own DNA was hasn't been tested and so on and so forth. But none of my relatives on his side who had done the test appeared like
Appeared on
anywhere in my
yours.
results
Hmm.
exactly. And
Hmm.
so I had to put it down. I had to put it away. I had to walk around and come back to it like a month or so later. Had some conversations and just had to deal with the fact that in my mid 50s, I had learned that the person who I thought was my father was not.
So let me
Um,
ask you, how old were you when you did the DNA test, or what year was it when you did the DNA?
2 years ago.
Okay, so 2019.
Yeah.
Okay. So you did the test in 2019. At that point, was your was your mother still alive?
And my mom died in 2004.
Okay.
And the man I thought was my biological father died several years after that.
Okay.
So there was neither of them was around for me to ask a thing, right?
Right. So you're just getting all of this information, like your cousin.
Absolutely. And then I was like, I gotta figure this out. Like after the initial shock, um, and and I'm having conversations with my siblings too. Like I'm like, whoa.
Mhm. And had
um,
any of them done it?
they had not,
Okay.
but I had all these questions, and I needed further proof or evidence or confirmation that these results were indeed accurate.
Mhm.
And so my two sisters decided to they agreed to do the test too. And so it did come back that we have different fathers. Um, and so I set about trying to figure out who mine was. 'Cause my identity for all those
Mhm.
years had been my mother on the one hand who did everything for us, and then an absentee father who did zero for
Right.
us. And and so I always said I got my good traits from my mom and my less good traits probably from my dad. And so it was
Mhm.
that binary was fairly easy,
Right, right. Because he
right?
wasn't there.
He wasn't there. And so I was left to fill in the lines and create this narrative about who I was. And part of that was based on who his not being there. And so it threw me for a loop. And so I just asked people, again, neither of them was alive. So I asked aunts and cousins and good friends of the family. And all they could say was, well, we heard this rumor or we heard that rumor, but it wasn't our
Mhm.
place. And we love your mom. And we don't want to do anything to
To tarnish
undermine, to
her
tarnish her
image,
legacy.
right,
Absolutely, because
her legacy.
they loved her,
Right, right.
and she a lovely in my mind, nothing could ever tarnish her, no
Right.
matter what facts
She's
I
your
learned.
mom. She raised you.
Absolutely,
She did all she could for you.
all she could for us, and under difficult circumstances herself.
Right.
And so, but I think some of this is generational too. People don't often want to talk about this stuff.
Right.
And I'm finding that with all of this new DNA technology, so many of these conversations are happening. And
Yes.
they can be disruptive if not handled well. They can be really disruptive. And
Yeah.
I wanted to, on the one hand, avoid disrupting people's lives, but I also felt deeply entitled to know my own ancestry.
Right. Yeah.
And so while I was careful in how I went about my journey, talking to my siblings, nieces and nephews, letting them know, okay, I'm about to embark on this journey. There are going to be some discoveries. My primary thinking early on was really about my mother's legacy,
Right.
right? Because she too had a father that did not raise her. They were not in each other's lives. And so she died without any relationship with her siblings on her
On her
father's side.
father's side. Okay.
And in fact, they didn't even know she existed until I contacted one or two of them after I got those results. So that was really what I was.
Let me tell you how many families are like that.
So
How,
many.
uh, uh, company included.
Well, yeah, I'm
There's
not surprised. I'm not
there's so
surprised.
many stories. So continue.
So many stories and so many secrets,
Yes.
right? Because 'cause
Yes.
imagine I was born, right? A single black mother with kids. Number one, who's going to believe her? Number two, all the judgment and shaming, all of that. So that's why I have deep, deep compassion and empathy for my mother.
Mhm.
Even I don't know that she knew, honestly, um, because she was in an off and on relationship with my siblings' father. And according to what I now know to be true, she had a one time experience with the person I now know to be my biological father. So
Okay.
just one time. And
Mhm.
so I took so I was asking all these questions, and one or two people said, "I've heard this rumor, I heard that rumor," and that just wasn't enough for me. It was, I was able to kind of imagine it might be like one or two people, but I just didn't have any of the evidence necessary to prove that. And so I was just waiting around, hoping that other people would take the test
Take the
and
test.
would further get, get me the evidence I needed to have a more clear idea about the identity of my biological father. And
Okay.
that is what happened, essentially. I mean, you want me to go ahead and tell that part, or
So as much as you want to tell, now here we
okay.
are. It's 2019. You've taken the test.
Yeah.
Your mother is no longer with you. The man who you thought was your father is no longer here. So you're trying to just dig up information, and nothing is coming up in the DNA results based on the your test. There's no connections. So at what point, because I think with some of the DNA companies, they send you sometimes updates as, this person's your
Yeah.
is your cousin or related to you in some way. And you're like, oh, really? Who is this person?
Yeah.
Like, you just never heard this person before, right? Because they're
Exactly.
like your 10th cousin or your fourth cousin or something like that. So in 2019, you take the test. And at what point was there, I guess, a hit on the DNA, if
Yeah.
that's what you call it?
Yeah. 2 years later, like 2 years later. So for 2 years, I'm kind of in limbo. And really, and I'm approaching it off and on because it can be, as you know, very overwhelming to embark
Yes.
on these journeys. And so sometimes I just like, I'm not making any progress and I just need to step away from
We
this for
all
a couple of
need
months.
a Henry Lewis, otherwise known as
Gates
Skip Gates,
in our
to
life,
do.
right?
Yes. Like,
Exactly.
that would just, that's on my bucket list,
Yeah.
to have him do.
I actually, so I have my version of Skip Gates. I have my version of Skip Gates.
Okay, okay,
So
okay.
that kind of helped me get the information I needed. So long story short, a dear friend from high school, Sam Anthony, was adopted as a kid, and he got diagnosed with cancer, and was battling it for like 17 years. And when there was no more treatment for him, and he was on his deathbed, he wanted to find his biological parents. Um, and he had a colleague who worked with him at the National Archives in Washington D.C., who was an amateur genealogist and just brilliant, brilliant, brilliant at it. And and so she helped him find his biological parents before he died.
Oh, beautiful.
It's an amazing story on the front page of the New York Times, story about his biological father.
Mm.
So folks should read that, if they can. His name is Sam Anthony. Um, and so Sam, before Sam died, he introduced me to his colleague and said, "Deb is great. She can help. If anybody can help you, she can."
Mhm.
And so she's doing it for free, just helping, because she's a great person. And so a couple things she said. So she said, "Reggie, you're the first Black person like I've worked with," and she said, yours is really challenging."
Mm.
And she said, um, "There's just a lot of intermarriage and intermingling. Number one, and then number two, there weren't so many records of
Records.
Black births and deaths and marriages and all of that stuff, right? In the
Mhm.
South, especially." And so I'm talking to another cousin who emerged from Ancestry.com, and who's also quite an expert at this point. And he said, well, the reason there was all that kind of intermingling and intermarriage, et cetera, is because of limited mobility. Like initially by law, Black folks couldn't move about the
Mm.
South and otherwise, right? And then, after the Civil War and the end of slavery, et cetera, uh, limited financial means made it hard for people to move about too. So there was a lot of folks just stayed in the same area,
Right, right.
unable to kind of move, and so a lot of relationships and things happen. And so all and so what Deb said, who was helping me, she said, there's just so much marriage and intermarriage. It's just hard for me. She said, but I'm not going to give up. I'm going to keep working with you because I know because she had herself been adopted. No, her father had been adopted, and so she knew what it meant to for people to know
To have that connection,
to
to
have the
know.
connection, right? Because
Yeah.
that's I mean to know your family really is to know yourself, right?
Yes, that is the legacy. That is
That's
it.
that is, and so fast forward fast forward until early November. She's writing me to update me on the progress. She said, I haven't made a lot of progress. I'm able to identify your paternal grandparents a few generations back. But after that, she said all of the intermarriage and all of the intermingling, like
It
all of
just
that
got a
stuff
little too confusing.
is too
So she found
confusing.
back then, she found
She
your father's family,
Yeah,
grand,
exactly. Great,
yeah,
great, yeah.
great.
And but could not bring it home, right, to the present day. And she said, so I was just about to hit send on this email where I'm updating you on where things stand, not a lot of progress lately. And I decided to check your results one more time. I had gotten email notifications, so I could have checked myself. But again, it was one of those moments I was kind of taking a break.
Hmm,
I
hmm.
wasn't responding to every email notification that I had another hit or whatever. I knew that I would get to it at some point. Deb beat me to the punch. She said, well, so I checked and guess what? There was somebody who matched really, really highly with you. And do you know this person's name? Like, yeah, I know that person's name. That's my good friend's son.
Wow.
And it ended up being not just my good friend's son, but my brother's son. So the match was to his son, my nephew.
Your nephew.
Yep.
Wow. So your nephew had taken the test, and he's young, right? He's
Like
like,
19.
most 19-year-olds aren't necessarily taking the test.
He wasn't doing it because he had nothing to do. His mother, his mother was also adopted, and
Oh,
so she was starting her own journey. And so she has twin sons, my nephews, um, and she tried to encourage. She wanted them to do the test too to kind of help with as much information that came out of that as possible. And so after my sisters, my nephew was my closest match. And so
after your sisters on your mother's side.
on my mother's side, yeah, I
Okay.
don't have it.
Then
Yeah, yeah,
then your nephew was the closest.
and
And
he's
your
on my father's
nephew
side.
on your father's side, on
Yeah,
your
because his
biological father's side.
mother had insisted that he take the test, and he was like, he's a college student, and he was just
Yeah, he's like,
and
whatever.
so literally, I think she helped him to take the test when he was home,
Uh-huh.
maybe mailed it in for him, and then
I'm sure.
and then when he got the results, like you need to register now. Like she walked him through the entire process, and then he ultimately registered, and that's how I knew. Like that is how I knew. And so I get this information late on a Monday evening, and I had gotten my booster shot for COVID that day too. So it's late. I texted my friend, right,
Mhm.
my brother, and said, dude, we need to talk. I was like, your son just matched really highly in my DNA results. And it wasn't registered
Right,
with him at
right,
all. He
right.
didn't know what I was trying to convey. And I didn't think should be saying it via text. It was late I didn't want to I said, so we should have a conversation.
Hey, brother,
Exactly. But he didn't get it.
in a
Like
text.
he
He
didn't
yeah,
get it. He didn't get it.
conceptualized like, okay, what?
Yeah.
Like
Right.
my
Cause I mean,
son and you?
right, right. Cause we've known each other for 35 whatever years, went to high school together, worked together, in
And
our
the work together is the lawyer.
yeah. the lawyer, Peter Greer, who I mentioned earlier, who I worked for when I was in college.
Hired you when you were in college.
Exactly.
I mean, what are the chances?
Uh, I thought those chances were zero because I had no real reason to doubt the story that I had been told about my father. Just none. I just didn't
Right.
entertain that there was somebody else until these DNA results came back.
Mhm.
And so Tony and I, like, we were texting each other. He was traveling. So we're like, yeah, we'll talk soon. That was kind of the way I left it. And so I mentioned I'd gotten a booster on that Monday. On Tuesday, I wasn't feeling really great. So I was like, I don't have the energy to deal with this stuff right now. But then on Wednesday, I woke up and I was like, I just need to get some confirmation. So I reached out to Peter Greer. I called him, picked up right away. And I said, so I don't know if Tony has told you, Um, but his son Trinity and I met really, really closely on this DNA stuff. He said, uh-huh. I said, well, is there anything you want to tell me? And he said, well, yeah. He said, your mother and I had a one-time fling. I had no idea that she'd become pregnant. Um, and so, that was that. But he said the timing makes sense,
Mhm.
and I take your word. And obviously, he's a lawyer too, so he believes in evidence, and so the DNA evidence
Right.
is there. Um, and I said, well, if you and Tony want to take, he's like, I don't need to take the test. You're my son.
Wow.
You're my son. Welcome to the family. Who wouldn't be proud to have you as a
Oh,
son?
I love
Yeah.
it. I love it. I love it. That is it's so beautiful because there's so many stories that don't end up like that.
Yeah.
And the blessing is that you, you know, you had someone who one acknowledged the fact that he had a relationship with your mom, as fleeting as it was,
Hmm.
um, and not knowing, he didn't
Yeah.
know.
He didn't know.
He didn't know.
Yeah. Like my mom, he's a man of high integrity and wants always to do the right thing. And so, um, yeah, there was no reason for me to not believe that he didn't know either. And so, and yeah, and so since then, we've just been trying to make up for lost time.
Absolutely incredible story. And for those who are against taking the test, it's to me it's cathartic in a way, because then you are able to look at where all of your um the pieces of the puzzle, right?
Hmm.
All of these aspects of who you are, what makes you who you are, what makes your skin color and your
Yeah.
hair texture, and
Hmm.
all of those things, and to think about your ancestors and what they went through so that you could be where you are today.
Yeah.
That I think that's one real important reason to do the DNA test. But also in regards to you, just knowing that this man who you thought was your father was not,
Yeah.
and taking the test, and just by chance, because had your brother's um the mother of your brother's son not forced the issue, it could have been another 2 4
Absolutely.
years,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
19-year-olds just aren't taking the test. They're
They
like,
are.
what?
Exactly.
Unless they're being
Exactly.
forced. Even older people
Absolutely.
aren't taking the test. So
Exactly.
19,
Yeah.
shoot,
Yeah.
50, 60-year-old folks aren't taking the test. I
Yeah.
just find this story absolutely fascinating. And I have, read the story as you posted it on Facebook. And like I said, and I immediately wanted to talk to you. And also, has kept up with some of the videos that your brother
Yeah.
did when you met was
Yeah.
it last week that you
It was
were
it
able
was
to?
last weekend that we finally, the three of us got together. My father, brother, and I got together and met.
Yeah, that, and then you've got this new family,
It's
and to
amazing.
be able to to have that. Can you talk a little bit about your siblings on your, by your mom? Like how
Yeah,
do they feel? Are you the only, well, it was a one-time thing, so you're the only child of your father, right?
yeah,
And all of the other siblings, like how are they feeling? Because it's a shock to the system, I would imagine.
yeah. I think it's a shock to lots of people's systems.
Mhm.
And so just two things. And so I mentioned at the very outset, this relates to the second part of your question, how um, I was always like, even as a 6 year old, fighting for justice and doing the right thing. And so I felt so different from all of my siblings. Right. I mean, like I was so single minded about my education and my career. They wanted to go outside and lovely people. I could not love them more, but they had different issues and priorities. They wanted to go outside, have fun, meet up with their friends. I'm like, justice, justice, justice. And they're like, who's this weird
Who
6 year
was
old
this?
kid?
He
And
had a
so,
Black Lives Matter sign before Black Lives Matter
right.
was a thing.
So true. And then it's like, but this explains so much. You know what I mean? It just explains so much because my father too was a lawyer and a civil rights activist and is all about Black liberation. And that's me. I found out when we did the reunion, um, that he was also a runner back in the day. And I've been a runner for a while. And the three of us got together kind of independently. We each brought a book to read, and it was all the same book, the 1619 Project by Nicole Hannah Jones.
Wow.
Right? So I mean, there's so many similarities, but when I embarked on this journey, I made it a point of including my maternal siblings, nieces, and nephews in that journey and bringing them along with me. I was like, this is what I'm about to do. There will be some disclosures. I think that we need to know who we are. And that for me included my mother's uh, father's family and those relatives, getting to know them. And I've gotten to know some of them too in the past 2 years. And but I brought I took great care and keeping my maternal relatives in the know and bringing them along because I mean, we've been bonded for all of this time, grew up together in challenging circumstances. So we are a unit, we are a team, and I didn't want them to think that I was trying to displace them or replace them, that I
Right,
didn't
right.
love and value them. And so I made sure to have those conversations with them before any of this went public. I let them know ahead of time.
Hmm.
And they just honestly could not be more excited. They are
Oh,
thrilled beyond pieces. They are happy that I have the answer that I've been looking for these past 2 years. It makes sense to them now too. It's like that's why our brother is the way that
the way
he
he is.
is. Exactly. That explains things.
Revolutionary.
Right. It kind of lets them off the hook for being different. And
Now we know. Now we know the
it's
truth.
just the aha moments just keep happening, really.
Yeah.
And but they could not be more loving and supportive and excited and that has typically been the reaction of anyone who knows me and who knows my father and brother and even people who just kind of read about our story.
Hmm.
It's been a happy ending and a moment in our culture and in the climate that we live in that people need those moments
Yeah,
and
definitely. A happy beginning, because this is
yeah,
like
yeah, it is a
the
big
all
deal.
of the new things, the revelations that are going to come from, your meeting. Like this has been a process. And so
Yeah,
each day and week and month and year is going to be a process of just learning so much about, this newfound family.
yeah, and they've been on my father's side too have been no less supporting and loving and warm and welcoming too. And it's really it's such a small world. And you know, both my parents grew up together.
Hmm.
Like um, my mother's mother, and now I know my father's mother. Like they were drinking buddies, right? I mean, they
Wow.
would hang out, right? They would sit on each other's porch and hang out and catch up. And
Hmm.
um, it's kind of like a full circle moment, frankly. And I feel really blessed. I've read and seen and heard about so many stories where this is not the outcome at
It's
all.
not. It's a shunning of the, the offspring, or, you know, having a not so great relationship with the father because
Yeah.
why'd you leave? And, even if sometimes fathers know and they still leave,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so, um I think it was just such a touching and beautiful story. And as much as you share going forward, I look forward to seeing, the posts and videos. And yeah, the way your brother was just, he was just so excited
Oh,
in the
you know
video.
what?
He was just over the moon excited.
I mean, I have always loved that guy. Even when we were in college working for our father, we just hit it off right away. And he's like the funniest person I know. So the creative artist, so talented. Um, but he said one thing. He said a number of things to me. And the older we get, I think the more comfortable we are in our own skin at showing vulnerability. And
Hmm.
and one of the things he said to me, pretty soon after finding out, um, was he said, I just have shed a lot of tears, Reggie, because I could see how hard your life was, like when you were growing up. Um, and he said, I've just shed so many tears because it broke my heart that you didn't have the support, financial and otherwise, of our father. And for someone to have that be their primary reaction is
Yeah.
just speaks to
Yeah.
like the
It
beauty the
the
beauty of
the
his heart,
of
right?
his heart. Yes, definitely. Definitely. That
Um,
I mean, he could only imagine what your struggle was.
yeah,
And he knows the life that he had.
yeah,
And then, the mother, I don't know if they were married, but the mother of his boys having been adopted, knowing, what that is like.
yeah.
Um, it does go to show the type of person that he is. And I looked at him and I said, he looks like my nephew.
Is that right?
Looks like
Uh-oh. That might be a result.
I don't think so. I think that my nephew, my brother-in-law is my nephew's
Yeah,
father.
yeah. But
but
I didn't mean
but
father. I
from
mean
the
cousin or
south,
something.
yeah, but from
Yeah,
the south. His family
absolutely.
is from the south, and he's got the look of my nephew. And I'm gonna actually send it to my nephew so that he could see it. Like, yeah, he kind of
Yeah,
looks like him.
I to your point about how my siblings on my mother's side took it. I mean, they've been great. And I said I did a lot of the groundwork to make sure that they felt appreciated and all of that. The other thing that I did was also make sure that my brother, Tony,
Hmm.
feels okay. Because, for all these years, and he's a little older than I am, he thought that he was his parents' only child. He didn't think that his father had any other kids.
Right.
And so here I am,
Here
like,
you come.
hey, here I am, I'm here. And so, but he's been great. He's been absolutely great. He's really comfortable in his skin. We both said to each other, if at this point in our lives, we found out that we have another sibling or brother, then each of us said we couldn't ask for a better person
Oh,
than each other. And
yeah.
so it's been great. It's been really great.
Yeah. No, it definitely shows in the videos. It definitely shows that he's excited, you're excited. It's a whirlwind that you've
It
been on,
is.
this whirlwind
Yeah.
adventure.
Hmm.
Um, and I can only imagine what will happen going forward as you learn more and, become more comfortable being around each other. And, the holidays,
Yeah.
Christmas is only a few days away.
Yeah.
We're recording this in December of 2021, but we are also in a pandemic
Exactly.
and not having the ability to meet with people and gather like we're so used to. So I can't wait to see those videos when you guys are all able, maybe all of your siblings are able to come together
Yeah.
and
Yeah, well, because already he's like, I
release.
want to, because on my mother's side, I have a niece who's an excellent basketball player, and I'm like, I got to get to Wilmington to see her play. He's like, I want to come too. She's not my niece, and so
Right.
I'm like, really, we all are family, and on the one you talked about all the revelations, etc., and all of that's really true, and so I've just tried to manage all of those things as to not become overwhelmed by all the revelations. Um and I think if there's a silver lining in the pandemic, you have to be careful and methodical about being in spaces with other people and stuff, and like not rushing out, and you know what I mean. And so
Yeah.
while the three of us had a reunion last week, it was just the three of us. And
Right.
if we're assuming that more of us will get together over time, then we'll have the opportunity to kind of carefully manage that, right? And so it'll
Hmm.
happen in time. But if
Exactly.
outside of the pandemic, it is really possible that we would have been pushing for a lot more of this to happen sooner. And I
Hmm.
just think that could have been potentially overwhelming. So I'm happy that we have the opportunity to kind of gradually
Right. Meet each
get
other, get to know each other, and
exactly.
develop the relationship on your own, because
Yeah,
when you start adding all these other folks, it just gets overwhelming and confusing.
it
Okay, that's
does.
your cousin. That's my
Exactly.
niece. That's my other niece,
Exactly.
So, but a
So
beautiful,
true.
beautiful, beautiful story. So, thank you, Reggie, so much for talking with me today and sharing this incredible story. I'm so honored that you are doing it in this venue with me. There was an article that came out in, was it a paper in Philadelphia? Do you want to mention that a little bit, so if people want to learn a little bit more
Oh
about
yeah,
your
sure.
story?
But first of all, thank you again for having me. Yeah, I definitely trusted you to help me tell the story, and uh, it shows why I trusted you. So thank you so much for all the care that you put into this. Um, so the Philadelphia Inquirer got wind of our story,
Hmm.
and they published it in a special edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer on Thanksgiving Day. So people can go online and type in Reggie Shuford, um, uh, Philadelphia Inquirer, or
Philadelphia Inquirer. Okay.
yeah, or ancestry.com, and they'll see the story.
Okay. Great. Great. And what's next on the horizon for you in terms of your next award, or
Here,
the next march where you're holding the BLM
I know
banner?
exactly. So I've been invited to um, uh, be in the Martin Luther King Jr. parade on MLK Day, January 17th, in my hometown. So I'm going to
Mhm.
be in the parade, and so they'll give me the opportunity to see uh, my relatives on both my mother's side and my father's side. So I'm looking forward to returning home, and seeing how that feels now that I have a whole different concept.
A whole different world.
Absolutely, it really is that. It was always focused on my mother's side of the family for the most part, and then now there's so much more family
Hmm.
to grow these relationships with, and I'm looking forward to doing that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, thank you again so much, and I send you the best going forward. And I look forward to hearing more and seeing more about what you guys are gonna do.
Thank you.
Maybe there's a book or a
Well, yeah,
movie.
I want to put it out there. I definitely have been trying to sit down and write a book. This is going to change that book from what I had in
Just
mind
a little.
originally, just a little,
Just
that
a
not
little.
just a little. So, and if other, yeah, and I, had a conversation with someone in Hollywood, but I don't know if all of that's going to come to pass or not, and it doesn't need to be. It doesn't need nothing more needs to happen as far as I'm concerned, as long as we have our relationships with each other. But if more comes of it, then I'll be open. But right now, it's just about the people and the relationships for me.
Yeah, definitely. Uh, if it's meant to be, it will happen. I know I
Yeah.
have a friend who is a screenwriter, and she would hear the story and be like, "I want the rights to it."
But
So
I'll,
just
I'll talk to
be
anybody.
prepared.
I know.
Just be
I'll talk.
prepared.
I'll talk to anybody about it. But if not, but again, if nothing comes of it, the greatest gift is the relationships that are forming as we
Yes,
speak.
yes. Oh, and the legacy that you guys are going to leave,
Which
the
are which is
legacy that you
yeah,
guys, are going to leave this earth when you do. Not saying it's happening tomorrow, God spare life, but
yeah,
uh, that's what this is about, is
yeah,
to ensure that people, get rid of those secrets and start talking and get the test and figure
yeah,
out, who you are.
yeah,
So
exactly.
thank you again so much. I really appreciate it. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Angela. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, bye bye.
Thank you for listening to Heirloom and Legacy. If you want to learn more about the work of heirloom estate and legacy preservation, you can find us at legacypreservation.life, on Instagram at Legacy Preservation, and on Twitter at Heirloom Legacy. Many thanks to my exceptional executive assistant, Queen Karen Garrison, aka Mommy Activist, and my outstanding engineer, Jonathan Reed. Thank you again for choosing Heirloom and Legacy. Please like, subscribe, and tell your friends about us.